out of that entire mess, I do feel like there were several announcements that were interesting enough that they do raise to the top of mind for the CIO office. And I think we agree that probably the one that stood out the most was the one around the open Llama Nemotron family of models. This is an announcement showing how Nvidia is working with the Meta Llama models to create AI agentic capabilities and to open these models up. And we saw a bunch of AI platforms showing commitments to the Nemotron models, including Accenture, Amdocs, Box, Deloitte, Microsoft, SAP, ServiceNow. So all these different companies saying we're going to build our agentic, so at least some agentic capabilities on top of this Nemotron announcement. And of course, this Nemotron announcement builds on top of other NVIDIA software capabilities that have been announced in the past, such as the NIM microservices, as well as the DGX cloud.
So I think there are two interesting takeaways from my perspective when I look at this. The first is that I am continually impressed with NVIDIA and what I'll call their discipline. One of the things you talk about the barrage, and we see this a lot from all these big vendors, where they cover so much ground, they just like bomb you with all the stuff, and it's like this massive spread. And on the surface, NVIDIA's looks the same, but one of the things that you find as you sort of dig into this is that they are actually pretty disciplined about not really venturing too far afield from their core. And what I mean is they're covering, I mean, we're going to talk today about robotics and networking. I mean, it sounds like that, right? But what you see once you get beneath the covers is that all of them are rooted in how you can make most effective use of their chipsets so that you can then take, right? And so it is about creating the stickiness of how they go forward. And all of these have a common theme, and they're very disciplined around it versus other organizations where they just seem to be doing all these different things and they aren't really connected. And so that was the first big takeaway, where I think this is very smart about getting people where we're now hitting the crescendo of agentic AI and agentic models being, reaching the sort of tipping point, and people, particularly vendors, really looking to double down on investments. And this is now suddenly another option, another way of going that is obviously it's very NVIDIA centric, but it is, relatively speaking, pretty agnostic, right? It leaves you pretty open. And that brings up the second big takeaway for me, in that I think this is like the third or fourth major announcement recently in the last several weeks where somebody is doing some major development on top of Meta's Llama LLM. And what's interesting is when we talk about LLMs at a broad level, we're always talking about OpenAI and Anthropic Claude and DeepSeek and whatever, but Llama is emerging as sort of the de facto open source model, even though it's not truly open source, but sort of the de facto, where you see people people trust Meta enough that they're willing to invest in it. And yet it's open source enough that they feel like they can make it their own and build stuff on top of it. And I think it's this really interesting thing that they may have found this sort of surprising pathway to very significant relevance. So anyway, those are when I read this announcement, those are the two big things that sort of stood out at me.
Yes, Meta has definitely made some missteps in trying to get into enterprise in the past. When they did Facebook for business, for instance, that was a complete failure. But this open source model wedge of getting into the enterprise AI world really does seem to be working. And kudos to Meta on figuring that out. Now, if only they'd figure out that they're better at open source AI than they are at this Meta thing, and perhaps name themselves more accurately, that might help. But that little nudge aside, I've got to admit, Meta's doing a great job on the AI side overall in supporting developers and handling what they do best at their root, which is providing this platform, this gigantic platform, and then letting developers go wild on it.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see. We always see the big lineup of companies, and this one was not different in that you had Microsoft, SAP, ServiceNow, Accenture, Deloitte. Now, what is interesting about all of this is all of these pretty much have investments in other platforms, Microsoft notably having built their own. And so it does speak to the just completely open state of the industry right now, where people are just, it's like a craps table where you're putting bets across everything on the table, right? Just trying to cover your bets everywhere. But it is interesting to see where people go with this. Deloitte is a sub announcement, which we didn't choose to cover in detail, but they announced, I think they're calling it Zora AI, right? Their own agentic AI
Yes.
platform built
Which
on
is
this. And
being
so I think we're going to see more of
augmented.
this.
Yeah. Yeah. So Deloitte is choosing to augment their Zora AI announcement with these Nvidia models, and Accenture is also coming out with their own industry models based on the Llama Nemotron AI models. And I think it's interesting that these gigantic consultants are starting to get into the AI space and figure out where AI can practically support work that they honestly are trying to bill for. They are trying to figure out how to get these managed services and consulting capabilities into the business and let AI do the work while they continue to bill whatever $100 an hour for, or 200 or 300 or 500 or 1,000.
It is interesting. I mean, I'm not a huge believer in AI replacing human labor for the most part, but I think there are some areas that are more ripe than others. And one of the proof points is how seriously the major consulting companies are taking this. It is very clear they see at least a potential threat on the horizon with it, and they're trying to get in front of it.